Here's the thing about family systems therapy. You cannot fly by the seat of your pants. There is no going with the flow in family therapy. And if you play a session by ear, things tend to get really complicated. Family systems therapists have a plan and a strategy. And actually, Salvador Minuchin likened being a family therapist to being a chess master, entering a competition with a strategy and a plan and knowing the enemy. If you are watching this video, you probably already know that this is already completely different from what it's like working one-on-one with an adult or a teenager. Because family work is so chaotic at times, there's so many people in the room, we have to have a map and a plan, and we have to know where we're going. In this video, I'm going to give you 5 essential tools that you might need if you are thinking of running a family systems therapy session. My hope is that this video is the beginning of a plan or an outline of a map that you might need to get you through the course of treatment with a family. Make sure you stay until the end because I'll show you how to get my nifty handout and the slides that accompany this video. If you don't know me already, my name is Oliver and I'm a family systems therapist. I'm a supervisor, a clinical director. I created a treatment center for teenagers that uses a family systems approach. Now, here's where I need your help. If you want another video that goes into the specifics of interventions, you have to let me know. Leave me a comment below. I know that every video on YouTube asks you at this point to leave a comment, but I really want to know if there's any interest for a deeper dive into family systems interventions. And I had this other idea that I may live to regret. If you want me to make a video about a family that you are working on, drop me an email and we'll figure out how to get it done. You can think of it as a mini consultation. Now, obviously, your name won't get mentioned, your family's names won't get mentioned, and we'll remove all of the identifying information. So it would be completely anonymous, but it might be a really juicy way to get into thinking about family systems and how we do family systems therapy. If we're going to play along with the map metaphor, a good place to start is by getting a lay of the land. So I think for me, that means a quick recap of the goals of family systems therapy. If you're totally new to family systems or need a reminder, we believe that a family is exhibiting symptoms because there's something off with the structure and the hierarchy. Now, the idea here is that healthy, happy, successful young adults come from households who have a family organization a little bit like this. So this is a family map, and you'll have to dig around on my YouTube channel to watch my other video on family mapping. If you haven't done so already, it is going to really, really help you understand this in a much more deeper level. And it's also one of my favorite tools to use when I'm working with a family. This image is of a really standard 2-parent household. And I'm definitely not saying that this is the only family structure that produces happy, healthy, successful young adults. Don't get hung up on this particular image. There's plenty of single-parent households that do this. There's plenty of blended families that do this. So the structures can vary. A healthy, happy family has adults on top, children underneath, nice distance between people, and nice, healthy boundaries. The general understanding is that the family you're about to work with or are working with does not look like this. So your goals are going to be to reorganize the family structure so that it does look a little bit more like this. The exact structure you decide on can be co-created with the family to take in their cultural, socioeconomic, spiritual, and family values to make it very specific to them. But adults on top, children underneath, nice distance between people, and nice healthy boundaries. So what are the goals of family therapy? Well, my go-to goals of family therapy are here. Modify the role of the IP because we don't want there to be an IP. We're going to push for clearer boundaries. We don't want these types of boundaries anywhere. We want nice, healthy boundaries. We want to increase the scope of communication. So if a parent is too harsh with their words, we want them to soften up. If the parents need help setting limits, we're going to toughen them up so that they can do that. Improving conflict resolution skills. I tend to find that most families do not know how to resolve conflict in a healthy way. So they keep having the same argument over and over, or conflict escalates and gets violent. So teaching these skills and helping family find new ways of solving problems is probably going to be one of the goals at some point. So if the end goal is to get the family looking more like this, then how do you figure out what they look like currently? We're going to use these first sessions and the data that you captured before they came to see you the intake data to assess and observe and get you thinking about different things. I think that lots and lots of data is generally a good thing when you're working with families. I'm going to run through a few of the ways that I assess a family, and I'll probably do another video on this that goes into more detail. In your first session, it is vital that part of your brain is on the lookout and assessing the family for these things: organization and hierarchy, communication, resonance, the position of the IP, and conflict resolution. Every group of people needs some organization if it's going to be successful, and that ranges from AA meetings, group therapy, or any company. Groups of people are only really effective when there's structure, organization, a leader, roles, communication, and the same is true for a family. And maybe you're already familiar with this if you're working with a very chaotic or very anxious family. You might know what it is to experience then a family with the absence of organization. It's really challenging. How do you assess for organization? Well, no one way to do it, but you can start thinking about things like, who is the person that called to set the appointment? Who sits down where in the office? Who speaks first? Who runs the show? Is it mom or the 15-year-old? Do they show up late? Are they on time? Do they come in a flurry of activity and noise, or are they silent? Hierarchy, well, as you know, I always want parents to be in charge on top of the family map. And this is a really important thing to assess. Who's running the session in this family? Is it the kids or the parents? Who deals with discipline in the family? Is there any discipline? Are the kids well behaved, or are they running wild? Who's going to pay? That might be an indicator of hierarchy and power. And again, don't worry about writing all of this down. I've got a nifty cheat sheet that I'll give to you at the end of the video. Communication. Again, there's no one way to assess communication, but you can be on the lookout for what's going on in the family. So one family might only communicate via text message and never face-to-face. Another family, you might notice that they never use I statements or talk about their feelings. Resonance is a nice way of saying enmeshment, and it comes from the idea of tuning forks. So if you have two tuning forks and you ping one to vibrate and bring it closer to the other one will start to vibrate too. In the same way, a person in a family, an enmeshed family who has a certain feeling, will spread their feeling to the other members of the family. Again, you can ask yourself questions like, how quickly does dad's irritation impact the whole family? If someone in the family laughs, do they all laugh together? You can think of emotions and especially anxiety spreading. The position of the IP, well, again, the identified patient is the person who's carrying the symptoms or the person who is the reason that they're in your office. It's usually a child or a teenager, and they are sometimes getting blamed for the family's problems. So that's Johnny's depression, Maggie's tendency to run away, Susie's self-harm. You get the picture. So you could be noticing if the IP is the black sheep of the family, like, we'd all be okay if Johnny would just stop being depressed. Or is the IP the center of the family? Oh, we didn't know if we were going to be on time because Maggie was having one of her episodes and we were nearly late because of it. In that instance, Maggie was holding up the whole family to get on time because one of her episodes was going on. So that IP has a lot of power. Conflict resolution is fairly straightforward because I think most people, if not the majority of people, really don't know how to deal with anger or conflict. And often in families, there are all kinds of issues going on when this is the case. They're stuck in a repeated pattern of interaction and seem unable to find new ways to interact or solve conflict or repair. Part of our job here is to get the family to try new approaches to conflict, which inevitably change the system. But first, we need to know what they're currently doing, what they've tried in the past that didn't work. So asking families how they resolve conflict or watching them see how they deal with the conflict live in person is going to be helpful for you to get more information. That was a really long build up to get you here to me talking about 5 of the most important family systems techniques you need. And these are fundamentals. You'll use some of them from the first session. You'll use others in and out sporadically. So we've got joining, circular questioning, observing and assessment, restructuring, and enactments. Joining just means that when a family starts treatment with you, the first thing you're going to do is shoot the shit. And that is slightly different, if not entirely different, from when you start doing therapy with an adult or a teenager. In individual sessions like that, you're going to use all of your best empathy skills. You're going to be actively listening. You're going to be trying to give that person the beautiful gift of being truly understood. That is not joining. So don't do that in a family session. It's going to take a really long time if you do. Joining is much lighter than that, and it's more social. The idea here is that to change a system, you have to be in the system. Well, at least a little bit in the system. You don't want to be too far sucked in that you become a family member. The family's most likely to change when they trust you and know you. So it's a vital skill, but it's also not something that you have to learn how to do because you've already got this. Joining isn't really one technique or method. It encompasses a variety of strategies and techniques that we use to connect with the family. Joining might not necessarily mean joining with all of the family all of the time. One variation of joining might involve me aligning with one family member and sometimes aligning with one family member against another family member. So I might join with a silent and moody teenager if I notice one parent starting to lay into them, asking this teen to answer my questions or to sit up straight or explain something to me. I'd join the teenager and say, I don't really think Jimmy wants to talk right now. Is that right, Jimmy? Okay. Is it okay if I check in with you later though? Okay. Jimmy's hopefully going to feel that I'm on his side in that moment, but I've also joined with him against mom, who might not be used to Jimmy having backup like that. So you're going to get lots more information here. Does she look offended? Does she look flustered? Is there a flicker of anxiety there? And if so, that might mean that there is some friction, which is a sign that the system is pushing back against a change that you tried to make. Circular questioning. Okay, I've made an entire video and a mini course on circular questioning because it is that important, but I still have to include it in this video because it is such a vital skill that you will need in your sessions, especially if you want to find out what the problem is that you're going to be focusing on during treatment and the ways that people interact around that problem. The opposite of circular questioning is linear questioning, and linear answers are sort of one-dimensional and flat. We are here because Johnny is depressed. Circular questioning invites multiple dimensions and interactions between other family members. If you're very persistent and ask these questions, you might get an answer that sounds more like, when my partner and I fight, Johnny seems to act in a very depressed manner, retreating to their bedroom, which makes us feel very concerned. So we turn our focus to Johnny and help them, which, now that you mention it, actually stops us from fighting. I notice I remain more worried about Johnny over the next few days, but my partner seems to give up on our relationship when I do that, which often creates more emotional distance and more conflict. With just the way you ask questions, you can get so much more information out of your first sessions, and you can set up the rest of your treatment because you know already some of the patterns of interactions that you need to replace. Some of the circular questions I might ask to get a response like that include: what is going on before Johnny acts depressed? Has it always been this way? What happens after Johnny is depressed? Who does what when Johnny goes to his room in a depressed state? Who's the first person to check on him? Then what happens? Who agrees with that? And what happens after that? The big mantra there is, and then what happens? And then what? And then what? What are they doing? What are they doing? So I'll leave you to find the other video on this, and please check out the mini course on mypeoplepatterns.com. It's only $9, and you get my cheat sheet, which is filled with circular questions that I still take into family therapy sessions. I think observational data is really underrated, but in structural family systems therapy, we still use it a fair amount. When I was running a treatment center for teenagers, I used observational data every week. So I surveyed every member of staff, whether they were clinicians or not, and asked them to answer various questions about the clients that were staying with us. Questions about what they had observed and seen. So you didn't need to be a clinician to do this. I was asking questions like, how would you rate their mood on a scale of 1 to 10 this week? Did you notice if they were eating healthily this week? Scale of 1 to 10. How did they seem to get on with other clients? Scale of 1 to 10. So this overly complicated spreadsheet would crunch all of those numbers from every staff member, average the data out, and it spat out these very lovely charts that gave us another way to think about how clients were progressing over their stay. Parents would love this. I think I drove my team nuts when I was building it, but that was valuable data to go alongside our more traditional ways of measuring, such as, the OQ and MMPIs. Structural family systems is quite famous for having us think about observations in the form of where people sit in the room. A family can't tell us what their structure and hierarchy is like because they're not thinking about it and they've no idea really what we mean. They can often show us, and the idea is that where people sit in the room is showing us a little bit about the structure. This is what I have on the first page of my clipboard whenever I do an intake with a family. It's a little map of my office and I mark on it where everyone sits. So things that you can think about are where people sit, obviously. Is the IP in between mum and dad? What might that mean? Is the IP on a sofa on their own? That might be information you need to know about how the IP is thought of in that family. But observational data is not just limited to seating, though. We want to pay attention to all kinds of things that we observe. Who talks to who interrupts who talks the most, who talks the least. Now, the ideal way of doing this would be having a co-therapist. So someone who's observing while you're asking questions and you can trade off. We used to do a multi-family group. So every kid, every parent, family member, and a bunch of staff, as many staff as I could get in the room, doing a group therapy every Saturday. And what was priceless for me was getting information from other members of staff about what they'd seen when my attention was over here, what people over here were doing. All of this data should be collected and stored in the back of your head. It's part of the equation. You don't have to hold on to it like it's gospel. But more information is better than less, and you can keep what you want and discard what you need to as you understand the family more and as you move through treatment. The data you're going to keep, though, or the data that stands out to you, is going to be really useful when you are conceptualizing what goes on with your family and when you create the family map. All right, we've all heard of the term enactments, and I tend to find that therapists are a bit reluctant to use them. Some of the myths I hear in my supervision groups are things like, we have to give up control of our session and turn it over to the family. Some people are worried that things get more intense if we let the family talk without interrupting when it gets to a certain level. Maybe. We're not keeping a safe space. We're not keeping the peace. And I think other people think that they're just legitimately complicated and hard to implement successfully. So hopefully this discussion is going to help you see that none of that is necessarily true. Enactments, in the broadest sense of the word, are any way that a therapist can get a family to interact with each other, to observe natural dynamics as if you weren't there. I tend to put things on spectrums. So with very simple enactments at one end of the spectrum, these are things that you probably do already without even knowing they're enactments, and far more structured and complicated ones at the other end. A really easy example for something at this lower end is just asking the family to discuss amongst themselves what they think the problem in the family is. And then looking at your shoes or looking down so that they don't make eye contact and talk to you. That's a way to encourage them to talk to each other. You can be a little more transparent or a little more clear and say, I would like you to discuss amongst yourselves what you think the problem is in your family. While you do that, I will be silent and just observe for a few minutes. So at the more complicated end, you can assign them a task, like discussing a vacation that they would all agree on. And I've got 4 go-to activities that I would love to share with you in another video. So be sure you hit subscribe and follow so that you see that as soon as I make it. Restructuring in family therapy is kind of like being a traffic cop for family interactions. It's about stepping in to make adjustments in the patterns of interactions that you are seeing going on in the session. So let's say you've got a family where the members are so tightly connected, so enmeshed that they lose their individuality. I can probably imagine this family sitting all together on the same sofa with the IP in the middle. So this is the sort of family in which every time you ask little Johnny a question, his mom or dad will jump in and answer for him. Whenever somebody speaks on behalf of another person, it's a pretty solid sign of enmeshment. Restructuring would be blocking her and saying, hold on a second, Mom, I would love to hear your thoughts in just 1 minute, though. The restructuring part would be me encouraging Johnny to answer the question himself. So I'm helping establish a boundary there between Mom and Johnny. I'm telling Mom that Johnny doesn't need her to speak for him anymore, and we're making them more separate. So I'm restructuring because I'm firming up that boundary. Sometimes, though, restructuring is about tearing boundaries down. Maybe you've got a family where parents are like ships in the night and you can feel the tension between them or see how emotionally disconnected they've become. In that case, you might work to dissolve some of that distance, helping them reconnect and find common ground. And that could be as simple as having them sit together on the same sofa, or by asking them to talk directly to each other. Look each other in the eyes and have this conversation. Right? Restructuring is about the deliberate ways you're intervening in order for the family to relate in different ways. And ideally, it's shaking up the structure that you started with so it can rebuild itself in a more healthy way. So we've looked at 5 core interventions of structural family systems therapy: joining, where we build trust and rapport with the family; circular questioning, which is my favorite technique to uncover underlying dynamics and get the most out of your first few sessions; observing and assessment, which I think is underrated and gives you so much information; restructuring is the process of reshaping the family map; and enactments, where we guide the family to observe their natural interactions when we're not around. These are just some of the tools that are available to you as a structural family systems therapist. Let me know if you have questions in the comments below. And good luck with that family session.